Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, elite marathoner Molly Bookmyer discusses how to be intuitive in and out of running. And after that, World of Running updates about making track exciting, Great Manchester, and more. Glad to be back with you again, or at least our voices are that much. And remember that we want to hear your questions and see your thoughts and ideas about things. And the best way, the easiest way to share those is to go to atozrunning.com/question. Ask your questions. We'll respond. We'll share thoughts, but we'll also put it on air at the end of the month, every month. Mm-hmm. Now, I have to tell you a story.
Oh, okay.
It's not a very long. It's not a very long story.
Z.
Oh, interesting. It's not a very long story, but it's a little crazy because I was running the other day, which is a thing some of us do from time to time, and something hit my leg.
Okay.
Now, I should back up slightly. I was wearing some noise-canceling earbuds, which I do now and then when I'm running easy runs.
It's not advised. That's not very safe, Zach.
Generally not advisable when you're running on busy roads. But I was not running on a busy road or at a busy time of day. However, I definitely was not listening to the world outside my head. And something hit my leg. I had no warning, and I had no inclination that there was anything about to hit me, to the point where when it happened, I was so disoriented that for a second I was like, that was really weird. What just happened? Like, how did my body move in that strange way and then bump up against myself? And then I realized, no, something actually hit my leg. So I turned around, and it was a horse.
What?
A horse had just hit my leg. Now, granted, I was just glancing over my shoulder and just kind of saw through the corner of my eye. But I tell you what, it's not every day that you look over your shoulder and see a horse that just hit your leg.
That's bizarre.
It's especially true that it's bizarre because it wasn't actually a horse. Because at first when I looked over my shoulder, I thought it was a horse because it was so big. And I kind of like was still disoriented, so I looked back to keep running. And then I was like, wait a second. So I looked over again. It was not a horse. It was a giant dog.
Okay.
It was so big. What are those dogs called? Great Danes. This dog was the size of a small horse, which is why I thought it was a horse.
Okay.
But here's the weirdest part about it. I'm not sure what the dog did to me. It hit me in some capacity because I felt something hit my leg, but I don't know what it did to me. It clearly didn't bite me because I wasn't actually hurt in any way.
Ran into you?
I don't know. But when I turned around, the dog just stood there staring at me, making not a sound, just looking at me. And I didn't know what to do. This strange dog horse had just done something to me, which is inexplicable, and was looking at me like, what you going to do about it?
I feel like all the dog owners listening right now are like, Zach, that's not a story.
It's a story. So you know what I did about it?
What?
I pointed off to the side of the road and said, go.
Okay.
You know what the dog did?
It went.
Because it heard my voice command it to go.
I bet you felt good about that, huh?
I don't know. I still don't know what to think about it.
Okay, well, on to the next thing. You've heard us talk about Flip Belt. It's the belt to put all your things in. Nutrition, keys, phone, otherwise, whatever you bring with you on the run, Flip Belt. And it's like the final days of the code, which is ANDIR20. Again, that's ANDIR20.
And it's not just the final days. Depending on when you're listening to this, you've already missed it.
That's true. It's
May
like 24th.
24th,
Yeah.
That code expires. So those of you who are the best of the listeners, you listen to podcasts the moment they come out, then you are on top of your game. And you can make use of that 20% off discount to get the best belt for putting stuff in it.
Very good.
That's it.
All right.
Well, speaking of things that you are doing in the near future, if you're not buying a flip belt with that code, ANDIR20, at least you are running some races. And if you're in the West Michigan area, we've got a few we want to mention because this is the time, it seems, in the year when there's just like a race every weekend. Maybe that's been happening for a little while now. But the thing that I like to try to do is to bring your attention to different types of event experiences and opportunities and different kinds of reasons why you might want to do something. Like, for instance, some of the ones we have here. So we're going to give you a few different weekends. If you've got nothing going on, these are some great events to jump into. On June 3rd, in Lowell, Michigan, there's this park right next to the river. I think it's like called River Park or Riverfront Park or something. It's a really neat little area right there downtown Lowell. That's where they're having the Strides for Life 5K, which is a nice opportunity to get in kind of like a small town feel event, which is always loads of fun.
June 3rd.
June 3rd. And then on June 10, you can get on the track, which there are just not that many opportunities for people like us to run on a track.
Right.
Which we have found out, as we've been talking with some of you, that not everybody loves that. But we do.
We
and
do.
You should too, because it's fun. Well, maybe you don't. But if you do want to get on the track, you can run a couple of different distances. Your choice. Things like mile or 5,000.
Not just running, though. There's also field events.
Yeah.
You didn't write that in your notes. That'd be cool to
Because
try.
I don't think you should do that if you're not already someone who does field events.
But maybe you are.
Okay.
Maybe you are
it's possible
multi-talented.
that people listening to this podcast throw the shot put or
possible.
jump the long jump. But whatever may be the case, this is a track meet that is open to all ages and all abilities and levels.
Cool.
That's a rare thing. And so
Yeah.
loads of fun, lots of excitement. It's on June 10. It's at Grand Valley State University. It's called the GVSU Redemption Meet. And you can sign up by going to directathletics.com. And we've included the direct link to their page here on the thing. They have had everything from U.S. championship qualifiers to little kids running anything and everything. They even set last year the girls' high school state record, or national? Was it national?
I
or
thought it
was
was
state?
national
I think it's the
record,
national. The girls' high school
I could be wrong
national
about that.
record. It is national in the 1,600 meters, and it's just loads of excitement. Spectators can come if you want to just come and watch and see, which
It's only $5 to spectate.
I plan to do. $5 to spectate, which is always loads of fun. By the way, first 50 entries get a T-shirt.
Cool.
Top 8 entries in the 200 meters, men's and women's, get a free singlet
What?
in addition to that T-shirt. Top 15 entries in the mile, men's and women's, also get a free singlet. So
Cool.
if you're looking for some track time, whether you want to run it or watch it, June 10 is a day to mark in Allendale, Michigan. And last one here, just a quick note, and we'll give you more info on this later. June 17 is the Meyer LPGA Classic 5K. So if you're in town for the LPGA, which many people are, apparently lots of people travel for golf, and you happen to want to run a 5K while you're there. So if that's the case, don't miss it. It's on Saturday, June 17, and part of the reason why you want to come is because bring all your people with you. They give everyone a free breakfast.
It's awesome.
Like a
It's
legit
great
breakfast
feel, yeah.
with like good coffee and stuff.
Yeah.
And
nice.
top 3 finishers in every age group get Meyer gift cards.
Like substantial
to the
ones.
tune of $500
Yeah.
for the first in each age group.
And I think they do occasionally give out other gift cards.
Well, okay, so this is true. We don't think that this was necessarily something they're
Normal,
promising would ever happen again. But at the last one, people from Meyer were just walking around handing out $100 gift cards.
That's crazy.
At random.
I don't. Yeah.
So you just got to be there eating breakfast, and you might
I
even
don't think
get
that was
more.
normal. I think
that
I
was
don't
not
know
normal.
what that was exactly, but
It
if
was
you guys,
Meyer just looking for ways to share with the community.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
Very cool. And I just have to say that you get to run it at my alma mater, Rockford High School. That's where it's at.
So this is a fun one because you actually start and finish on the track, which is always kind of an exciting way to do a 5K. Come down into the stadium from like the upper ramp. It's cool. All right. So there you go. June 3, June 10, June 17. You got some races to run, 5Ks among other things, and it's going to be loads of fun if you're in the West Michigan area. If you're not and you've got an exciting race that you're putting on, also let us know. We may just want to shout out your events too in other areas.
Very cool. Well, let's get on to our main topic. Today we have the privilege of having a guest on the show, Molly Bookmyer. She's an accomplished distance runner who also has a day job. Like you and me, she trains and competes at the highest level while balancing everything. Recently, she has achieved many top 10 finishes in a variety of events ranging from the 10K to the marathon. Molly's personal best half marathon was from 2022 this past fall, and she won in a time of 1:10:51 at the Nationwide Children's Hospital Half Marathon in Columbus, Ohio.
That's
Super
moving.
speedy. Molly was a 2020 Olympic Trials Marathon qualifier, and she's already qualified for the 2024 Olympic Trials Marathon with a blazing time of 2:31:38, which she ran at CIM in 2022, which was just this past December. And then near and dear to our heart, and literally near to our home, Molly was the 2019 bronze medalist at the 25K championships here in Grand Rapids, Michigan at the Riverbank Run. While these shining moments are often highlighted, as they should be, they were only possible because of perseverance that Molly strengthened through a lot of challenges. Molly underwent 2 brain surgeries, walked beside her husband through cancer, and has had stress fractures and injuries like a lot of runners do. And in this episode, Molly will talk about being in tune with your body, health advocacy, the team it takes to succeed, and practical tips for evaluating how you feel in order to become more intuitive. Let's talk to Molly. Hi, Molly. Welcome to the AtoZrunning podcast.
Hi, Andy. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited that you're here too. And with this turn of season, you're from Ohio, we're from Michigan, so we can commiserate this long spring finally turning into real spring, I hope, knock on wood.
Yeah, it's actually I don't know about you, but it's a really nice day here, which is finally we're getting some spring, which makes me happy. So I'm excited.
Me too. Now, speaking of seasons of life, I think we want to just hop right in, Molly, with your story, where you've come from and what kind of running you were doing early on and how that has progressed into where you are today.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. So I live in Ohio and I attended Ohio State University. And I walked on the team there. So I was a walk-on in college and I ran for 3 years at Ohio State. I ended up quitting the team my 4th year just because I had a stress fracture and I was frustrated and was dealing with some health issues. And then lo and behold, after a lot of different tests and some blood work and some doctor's appointments, we found out that I had a brain tumor. So for a couple of years, we tracked the brain tumor with scans. We did a spinal tap, so I knew that it wasn't cancerous. So we were just tracking it and it grew and grew and grew. So we decided in 2015 to operate on it and to remove the tumor. So I had surgery in January of 2015 to remove the tumor. It's a pretty invasive surgery. I lived at home for about 8 weeks after the surgery and had to relearn to walk with a walker. So that was tough, but we got through it. And unfortunately, that couple months later, I was getting really bad headaches and was throwing up at night because the headaches were so bad. So I had to have a second emergency brain surgery to relieve something called hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain, which just means it was building up and just really powerful pressure headaches. So they inserted a tube. I still have a tube in my head and a little reservoir to collect the water that was building up. So that was 2015. And I slowly was able to get back into running, walk running and eventually running. But unfortunately that fall, I was working all day and I went for a run on the treadmill after work. And I had a seizure while I was running on the treadmill. So I woke up in an ambulance and we had to start seizure medication after that. And I've been seizure free since. So that's good news. And then what else? So I started, was running just to stay in shape and I got married. I met my husband in college and we went on our honeymoon. So we got married in 2017 and we came home from our honeymoon and he was complaining of back pain. So after some conversations and some doctor visits, we found out that he had testicular cancer. So we hopped right into that and got him going through surgeries and treatments pretty quickly. And luckily, we were able to fight that battle and he's cancer free now. And all during his treatments was a time that I really used running as a mental outlet and to help me to stay sane. And I would say that's kind of when I fell back into love with running and just have progressed from there.
And boy, have you progressed.
Yeah.
We told the audience before we hopped on this call about all the amazing accomplishments that you've had in the sport. Now, you were doing running in college, and how was it serving you then? And then how did it serve you differently after you had gone through such a journey, health-wise and with your husband, so many difficulties that you experienced during that time frame? Was there a shift, and what was that shift?
Yeah, I think in college, I was a walk-on and I feel like I just got frustrated a lot with running. I feel like I wasn't loving the sport as much as I should love it. I think that's why I walked away from the sport. It's just I didn't love it anymore. And I felt like it's something I had to do and I had to perform at these races. And, I didn't get to pick what I was doing. It's like I felt like I had to do practice at these times or had to perform at certain races. And I just was never running as well as I wanted to. And when I got back into running while I was taking care of my husband, I think I found like the peace and the calm that running brought me. And it gave me time to like think through everything that we were going through, be grateful for the time that I was able to spend out running, and being able to like help myself then. So I think it was running shifted because it served more of a purpose of helping me overcome some of the most difficult moments of my life. It was like really beneficial for my mental health then.
Mm-hmm. Do you imagine when you were a senior and you're disappointed because you had to leave the team due to the stress fracture and it was causing you all this stress, did you imagine that you'd pick up running again after, or were you so frustrated that you're like, I'm not really sure about the sport?
Yeah, no, I think I was done with it. I didn't, yeah. I think I always thought that I would like run or work out to stay in shape, but I don't think that I ever saw myself coming back to compete at the level that I'm competing at now.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of cool. I feel like it's cool that I've given myself space to grow into running later in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when was that switch? Like, I'm sure that it wasn't a complete switch, but you have the layer of like, this is how running is serving me. And then I'm getting through these really difficult days. It's helping me find the peace and solace and clarity to be a good wife and to be able to fight my own health battles. Like, you had that layer, but then there was another layer where you then were very competitive in this sport and you were finishing, at a very high level. When did that switch happen where it was serving on the movement plane, but then now you're in a competition plane? And like, when did that happen? And did that change how you viewed running?
Yeah, so so my husband beat cancer in 2018. So I actually decided to run Grandma's Marathon that year, like in his just to run. I just want to run a marathon because I was running through it and I wanted to do it in his honor. So I ran Grandma's Marathon that year and I finished in 2:46. And so the standard at that time was 2:45. And I was like, well, shoot, if I can just like run the marathon and I can run in 2:46, like maybe I can hit the standard. And so that became my goal at the time. And I attempted to run CIM in the fall, and I ended up having stomach issues, which unfortunately, we can talk about this later, is something that I had just figured out this past year. But I ended up getting my OTQ standard in Houston that year, and then I ran the 25K championship. Like I got somebody to kind of help give me some coaching at the time, and I ran my first like US championship race, and I finished third. And I was like, man, if I can, after just a year, like focusing a little bit more on running, if I can spend a little bit more time and I can finish third in a US championship race, where else can I take it? I think that was kind of the shift of like, maybe I am like a good runner and maybe I can progress more than I thought I could.
Mm-hmm. Let's just talk about that race a little bit because it was so awesome. And because a lot of our listeners that are local to the Grand Rapids area are very familiar with the Riverbank Run and the 25K USATF championships. So it's near and dear to our heart. So we would love to hear you unpack that race a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So like I said, it was my first US championship race. And I had no idea what I was doing at the time. So we drove up there, like my husband drove with me. I didn't even go to like the elite meeting. Like normally before these races now, like they have elite technical meetings. And I didn't even know what that was. I didn't go to the meeting. I just like showed up, got my bib like on the side. And I remember the night before, like they sent out the lists of who was racing, and I thought I could be competitive. And then I remember they announced that Sarah Hall and Emma Bates were going to run the race, and I was like, "Oh shoot! Like they're really fast. This is going to be tough." And I remember talking to the guy who was helping me out, and he was like, he just gave me a lot of confidence the night before of like, just go out there and be yourself, do what you do best. And when the gun went off, like those two, they just went off and they kind of ran their own race, and the rest of us were kind of in a pack behind them. And I just remember like Dakota was in the race with me, and some other girls obviously were in the race. And I just, ran my own race. I felt like I ran smart, and I took fuel, and I finished third. And it was like, I just remember being so proud of myself. And it was just a really cool experience because it was the first time I got to compete on a higher playing field, and I felt like I did what I came there to do. And yeah, I was just really excited and happy with how I performed.
Oh yeah, you should be.
Yeah.
Podium finish at a US
Yeah.
championship. That's fantastic. So exciting. And from there, from like grandma's until now, you've progressed a lot in the marathon. So maybe we should talk a little bit about your marathon journey now too.
Yeah, we can talk through the marathon. It's funny. I actually feel like I am not where I want to be with my marathon. It's tough because like this past year, and the way I tell it's gonna, like I ran like 2:31 like 4 times this year, which is to me is like a little bit frustrating. And there were a lot of different things that happened in the different races where I feel like my fitness was a lot better than what my marathon time shows. So still feel like I'm figuring out the marathon. I have a lot of things to unpack there, but yeah, I've definitely progressed. I think a lot of it's been figuring out a little bit of more the nutrition. So I said in I don't even know, was it 2017 or 2018, I did CIM and I had a drop, and due to stomach issues. Well, a year ago, I ran the Houston Marathon, and I finished. And there's no way I should have finished the race because I got really, really sick in the race. Like the last 8 miles, I was super sick. And I found out because I went to the doctor afterwards. And when I finished the race, I was like, I'm never going to run a marathon if I ever have to go through this experience that I just had, because I got, like I said, super sick and it was not fun. And so I went to a doctor, and eventually I got in to see a gastroenterologist, and found out that I have celiac disease. So over this past year, I have learned a lot of like shifting my nutrition to make sure that I'm absorbing nutrients and not eating, pasta the night before. That's actually going to make me really sick. So unfortunately, I've dealt with stomach issues for a long time, and I think a lot of people have brushed it off as it's just a runner thing. It happens to everybody. But I think mine was a little bit more severe, and I think for a long time I believed them, and I kind of wish I would have maybe advocated for myself a little bit more earlier on when I was going through it, because I feel like I wasted a lot of time. But it's part of the journey, and I am where I am now, and so I just have to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough thing to deal with, those things that are harder to explain and take a lot of effort to figure out. It's not an easy, just like someone can tell you immediately what's wrong. There's testing involved, and there's self-advocacy involved, which is kind of what we want to dive in here today with, because you've been relentless. I think that's a word that I would use to describe you, Molly. You are relentless. You keep on showing up. You keep on overcoming very, very difficult challenges that a lot of people would just throw up their hands and be like, this is too hard. This is too hard. And you have overcome that, and you're an inspiration. And I would love to hear more of how you've had to do that and how that was developed, because I'm sure it was over time, that you developed this relentless nature and this self-advocacy. When do you think that started to blossom, where you needed to have the answers and you were seeking the help that you need?
So I don't think I learned to advocate for myself until I had to advocate for my husband. So I think I was injured. I had injuries in high school, and I was injured in college a lot. And I think the shift happened when I started to speak up more, was like when I saw my husband going through like his surgeries and his chemo and stuff. Like when you're going through cancer, like you don't get to pick like if you're going to stop or not. Like you have to keep going through treatment. And there were a lot of times like that he was really struggling or was in a lot of pain. And like when he first started chemo, he was actually allergic to the chemo and he started to not being able to breathe. So it's like there was a lot of things where I had to speak up for him and make sure that he was getting the treatments that he needed. And I think that's when I started to learn how to advocate for others. And I think over time, that's helped translate into like advocating for myself. It's not easy. And like I said, sometimes I feel like I've not wasted, sometimes it's just taken a long time to figure some things out. But I really believe in myself as a runner, and I feel like I have people around me who believe in me as a runner. And I see the work that I put in and I see the workouts that I accomplish. And so I think just like seeing all that stuff over time and learning how to speak up for my husband has allowed me to like navigate the highs and lows, and when things aren't going well, speak up for myself.
Mm-hmm. What does that look like in different relationships? Let's maybe start with like work, your work-life balance, protecting yourself or finding the balance. How does that look in like with your work relationship?
Yeah, so I actually I have a remote job now. So I think the thing that I've learned with like work is because I care so much about my running right now, like maybe I can't want to go for like the biggest promotion at work. So I, level set my expectations at work, and I work really hard and I get all my work done. But I set boundaries where I'm not going to work all night long because I need to get a good night's sleep, and I need to make sure I get my training in. So I think I wouldn't call it like sacrifices, but maybe just balancing what's important to you at the time. So like right now, running is super important to me. So my work is important and I'm going to work hard and do a good job, but maybe I'm not going to go for the biggest promotion at work, where maybe in 5 years, maybe that there will be a shift or something else will come into my life that's more important. Or, when my husband was going through cancer treatment, that was the most important thing in my life. So I think it's just going with the ebbs and flows and balancing working full time, but setting up boundaries for myself of, okay, when it's like 5 or 5:30 at night, like my workday is done, focus on running or whatever, just making sure that I give myself space to get done the important things for myself.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. And I like the word that you use, boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really important word when it comes to protecting ourselves as runners from injury and sickness and burnout and all the plethora of things that can keep us from enjoying the sport that we love. So having boundaries, what does that look like in other areas?
Yeah. So I think it's difficult, and I guess I haven't always like known what my boundaries are. I feel like sometimes I learn that things make me uncomfortable, and then I'm like, okay, well, I need to put a boundary there. So a previous coach that I was working with wanted me to like start a Strava, and I don't use Strava, and it's not because I don't want to share my workouts or my running. It's just, honestly, I feel like I just don't have time to manage a Strava account on top of everything else. But also like running is super personal to me because I think it has helped me overcome so much. And so I remember I like created a Strava account, and it just made me feel so like dirty. Like it wasn't who I was, and I wasn't being my authentic self by creating this account. So I decided not to create an account. So to me, like that is like a boundary. Like who, if I want to share certain workouts or certain things that I'm working through, like I have my own ability to share that, but everything else like goes to my coach. My coach gets to see all my workouts, all my splits, and all that data, and he can analyze all the data and come up with feedback and suggestions and changes and stuff. And that's my coach's job, right? I don't need everybody else from the outside giving me feedback on my daily workout. So I think that's how I've protected myself from the stress of the social media world with like running sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Social media. So are there other social media boundaries because I think we all have to navigate, like what things do we share? How often are we on? Is there a time of night that we turn it off? Like, if you don't mind me asking, I don't want to breach a boundary here. Like, but is there any kind of other boundaries that you've had with social media?
I think that like if you want to share something about yourself, like I think you can share whatever you want to share about yourself, as long as like if it's a positive message that you're trying to get out there to try to help people. So I think that's what I try to do with my social media, is like I want to help inspire people to keep pushing, even though things might not be going the way that we want them to go. I feel like for me, like social media boundaries is like if I tell like somebody else something that's going on with my life, I don't want them to share it, because I feel like then I don't have the narrative to share, or maybe I feel like something's going to get misconstrued. So I think that's a boundary of just making sure that I protect myself that way, that if I have certain things going on in my personal life, or if I have an injury, like it's my narrative to share, and it's nobody else's narrative to share. So I think that's a good boundary. And then, I mean, I think it's just healthy. Like, I think the comparison game is really difficult. So I feel like it's really important with social media to just stay in your own lane. So I think it's really great to follow a lot of people and get inspiration from them and learn from them, and see that people can overcome a lot of the highs and the lows. But you need to be able to not compare your journey to others, which is really difficult. So whether that's like, so I journal a lot. So like journaling's been helping me with that. So if I'm on social media and something starts to bother me, I will write it down and explain like why something is bothering me. So I guess I don't have like time limits or limits on like what I want to share. I just think it's important that like whatever is being shared is about my personal life or my personal injuries or difficulties is coming more from me instead of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Like a perception that you're trying to create, or I really think that's a very deep piece of advice there, where you're trying to look inward instead of managing other people's expectations or their thoughts. But that process for you of having self-advocacy begins with you knowing what's going on inside of you. And I think journaling is a really great way to do that. And I like how you framed that. It's not as much like what I'm not doing, but what I am doing that's helping me manage this. So that's a really great piece of advice there. Now moving on to like maybe a little bit more of a different aspect, which is like asking for the blood test or asking for the test to be done. Have there been times that you've had to be an advocate that direction, where it's like, there's something wrong and I know it's wrong, please help me, like, and have to push for it?
Yeah. So at the Houston Marathon, I mean, this is super embarrassing, but whatever. I'm just going to share it anyways, because maybe somebody else had this happen. Like I pooped blood for like the last 8 to 10 miles of the race. It was horrible, absolutely horrible experience. And so I knew something was like really wrong. Like this does not happen. And this happened to everybody, then nobody would run marathons. And so when I got to my, even like the first like doctor that I went to, they were just like, it's just a runner thing. It's just a runner thing. Or like my coach at the time was like, well, your heart rate's just too high. And it's like, this is not just a runner thing, or it's not that my heart rate's too high. Like something is really wrong. And it's affecting my performance, and that matters to me. So Luckily, I got my primary care doctor to refer me to a gastroenterologist, and even he didn't want to do the test for the celiac disease. But I just kept asking, and eventually he said yes. So he did some blood tests, and we did some other like procedures to test for it. And then it came back positive. So it wasn't easy to get the tests, and it definitely took a while to get the tests done. But I was not going to run another marathon unless I tested for this, and I wanted to run another marathon, and I was not going to leave that doctor's office until he let me get certain blood tests and stuff done. And luckily, like, he agreed that we would do them just to cover all the bases, and we got some answers.
Wow. I'm glad you shared that, because I think a lot of us have things that we like just are, this is a normal runner thing, even with pelvic floor health. And as a female, like, some things that we've normalized are things that we need to work on to help us become a healthy and thriving runner. There's just a lot of different things that we just need to look into and not just accept this is a normal runner thing.
Right. And for me, it was like,
yeah.
No, it's not normal. And like I said, I mean, I had to drop out of CIM, a couple of years before. So it's not like this was like, it wasn't a one-time thing. Like, it was happening on workouts. It was happening on easy runs. It was happening like often. And I think it was happening so often that like it's sometimes like, I mean, I knew where all the bathrooms were on all my stuff, like on my runs. Right. And now I'm like, well, that's a little weird. Like, I know like runners know where the bathrooms are, but to like literally map out your run so you know where the bathrooms are, I think is different. So yeah, again, it's unfortunately the journey, I think, to get answers can take a long time, but I think often like we know when something's wrong. And so if you think something's wrong, like, you're probably right. We might not know what's wrong, but sometimes like something is off, and we know our bodies best. So,
And how have you grown that intuition with your own body? Is that something that was just like time and space, or is it something you track more things after your runs or your sleep regimen? How do you develop your intuition as a runner?
Yeah, so I just go a lot on like how I feel. I would say like I could run a workout and I could hit the same splits, and I could feel really tired and exhausted and cranky all day after that workout, or I could feel really energized and excited and happy all day after that workout. And those are two very different things. And so again, it goes back to like, I mean, I love to journal and I love to write down all my workouts and everything. And I think so many people track all of just like the data and the analytics and like the heart rate and all that stuff, but I go by how I feel. So like I'll write down all my splits, and I think it's important to hit all the times, but I think it's also important to say like, this is how I felt. This was the weather. This is how I felt afterwards. Like, was I hungry afterwards? Did I eat before? Did I drink a lot of water? And I think just being really in tune with my body, and making sure I sleep really well at night. So, right, I work full time, so I don't really get a break through the day, but I do make sure, like, I go to bed early every night, and I make sure I sleep through the night. So if I stop sleeping through the night, I think that's like the biggest red flag for me, of like something's off. Either I'm overtraining or I'm too tired. But I think sleep is the most important recovery tool. So you have to make sure you get your sleep. And then if you're not sleeping well and you're typically sleeping well, like your body's telling you something is off, I think.
Yeah, those are all really good pieces of advice and things to be looking at. I like that it's not just about the data, it's about how you feel. Yeah. I think that's a huge part of like what we talk about, A to Z running, like the intuition, growing that intuition. It makes an enormous difference. Like the data doesn't tell the whole story. That's the outcome, but what was the input, right? Like how was I feeling as I was doing this effort? So I think that's extremely beneficial for our audience to hear. our audience loves to hear about racing. So I know this is kind of like a switching gears, but can you talk to us about your favorite race, the one that you felt represented your fitness the most, or you had the most fun with? Any that come to mind in particular?
Yeah, so I would say like two. So last fall I ran the Columbus Half Marathon, which is always like a super important. It's my home race, so it's my half marathon in Columbus, Ohio. So I already absolutely love the race. Like, there's something special about running through your hometown, and like I know the race directors, and it's supported by a nationwide children's hospital. So every mile there's like a children's champion. So somebody, little kids who are going through cancer or other big health scares. So I think it's really special to have them out there on the course with them. And then my family's always there, which is important to me. And that day I ran a PR. So I ran like just under 111. I ran like 110.51 or 52, which was just a really good day for me. I was struggling with enjoying racing, I would say. A few races before then I had some changes, and I just was struggling with enjoying the race experience. So for me, that day wasn't only about the time. It was like I finally felt like I showed up for a race and was able to take in the race. And I went out smart, and my last mile was my fastest mile, which was the whole plan. I think I closed in like a 5:08, which for a half marathon, I was like super proud of myself for. So that was a great day and a great experience. And I'll cherish that memory for a while. And then more recently, so a couple weeks ago, I ran the Cooper Bridge 10K, which was just really fun. It's in Charleston, and I was super excited because my parents were in Hilton Head, so they were able to come to the race and watch me race, which again, I always love when my family is able to be there because I think we all need our support system. And for me, my family is a big piece of that. So they were there, and I just wanted to go to the race, and I wanted to make sure I enjoyed the whole weekend. So I felt like I went there with a good attitude, and I knew it was going to be really tough because it's a point-to-point course, and it was super windy that day. I think I was telling you before, I think there was probably sustained 20, 25 mile per hour winds, and then gusts of 30 mile per hour winds, and you're running over this big bridge, and we were running sideways. And so the times were slow that day. So maybe I'm a little bit disappointed with my time, but again, I feel like I raced really well, and I finished 5th overall and 2nd American. So I was proud with, even though the time probably wasn't reflective, or I know is not reflective of my fitness. I feel like I raced some really talented women, and I feel like my racing strategy was good, and that my place was, I was proud of my placing. So it was a good day.
Mm-hmm. I love that you shared that one too. And you had the 110.52, which is so fast. And then you have another race, which is also fast, but not to the level of your fitness that you were feeling and seeing in your training. Then they're both really great days. The variables, were different in each one, but you could still compete to the level that you were hoping to compete.
Yeah, so I talked a lot about how I think journaling is super important. And the one thing that we started to do, and I kind of got help from somebody else with this as well, is after races, I used to get so hung up on just the time for a race and saying this is only a good race because I ran X time, or this is a bad race because I ran X time. But he suggested that I have a consistent way on how to reflect on every race. So it's 4 questions. So the first question is, what is the race time? And but give the time and context. So give the course, the turns, the weather, the context of what was really happening on that day. So the time's always going to be there, but kind of explain the situation around the day of the race. Number 2 was rate how you competed. So effort wise and tactically wise, how do you feel like you actually competed that day? 3 are things to carry forward. So I ran a 5K, and I got passed in the last 0.1, and I was so disappointed that I got passed in the last 0.1 of a 5K. So that's something I wanted to carry forward. I wanted to carry forward that disappointment of getting passed at the end of that feeling, and not to dwell on it, but so that next race, when I ran the next time in that 10K, when somebody passed me at the end, I said, I don't want that to happen again. So I went back and fought back, and I was able to beat the person who passed me at the end. So that would be an example of that. And the fourth one is write down what I need to let go. So stuff that is real but does no good to hold on to in your head. So I ran a 5K, and the course is really difficult, and there were a lot of turns, and the times were slower. So for a while I was hung up on the time, but it does me no good to dwell on the time. So like, I need to let go that the 5K time was a reflection of fitness, and just know, again, go back to the other things, like I competed well, or focus on the other good parts of what I did. So again, that was just something that I've started to do about how I am going to journal after my races. And I think it's important to keep it consistent every time.
I love that you shared that. We talked about like boundaries, keeping people keeping that space for ourselves, right? Or like finding out where our boundaries are. You had mentioned bringing people in as part of the healthy, thriving part of helping you flourish as well. So beyond your support system of your family, what other ways do you find support?
Yeah, so I have a coach now who is here in Columbus, Ohio, and I absolutely adore him and love working with him. He's the best. And so like, he comes to my workouts, and sometimes like he used to run professionally, so sometimes we run together, and so he just gives me a lot of good advice. So I definitely lean on him for a lot of like feedback and advice. And when I start to get overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I have all this work, and I have to go to these doctor's appointments, and I have this PT appointment, and I have to run, and I have to cross train and strength train, and like a million things to do, which I'm sure everybody can relate with. He's always just like so calm and so chill, and it's like, just day by day, Molly, just take it day by day. It's okay. Or so he's been a really positive influence on me. So that's been super helpful, and I really enjoy working with him. I have a couple really close like girlfriends here in Columbus who are runners. And so I love when we can get miles in together, right? Everybody's schedules are different because we all work full time. So that's a little bit difficult, but I love when we can get runs in together and just chit chat and enjoy spending the time together. So they're a big piece of my support system too. And then in general, Columbus just has I absolutely love going out. There's a trail here called the Olentangy Trail. It's a bike path. And you go out there on a Saturday morning, and I'm not even kidding, there's 400 people out there running, and I love it. And it just gives me so much joy and so much energy. And I wave to everybody, and they wave to me. And I sometimes I just feel like Columbus is really special, and I feel like all those people have my back. So in a weird way, I feel like they're a huge piece of my support system too.
That's really cool that
Yeah,
you have
I love it
behind you. And it is tough to train. You're training at this really high level in a place that's harder to train. So for you to create that support system for yourself and all those different facets, I think is really helpful. And I think that we can all relate to, because we're not in a pro scenario. Most of us are running for our own goals and enjoyment, but that still resonates for us to have our support system, because we're working really hard, like you were talking about, juggling all these different things and trying to achieve our goals and running. So that was great advice there, how we can flourish, and then the boundaries that we can set, the self-advocacy. Now, if there's someone listening today, Molly, who's struggling with being relentless like you have been throughout your journey and is feeling the tension there, should I keep running? There are things going on. How would you encourage them today?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing is regardless of the races, just fall back in love with running. Just go out there every day. No matter what. And my husband tells me this, no matter, you're going to go out there and you're going to want to enjoy running for the rest of your life, right? That's something that I know I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life. So if somebody is struggling with the highs and lows right now, just go back through and remember why you started running, and just start to just enjoy enjoy running and the process again, and take away the stress of the goals and the stress of competing at whatever level your goals are at. Just fall back in love with the process and remember why you started doing it. And I think over time, if you want to get back to the competitive nature or have some more aggressive goals, I think that will come with time. But I would just say take that pressure away for now, and just do it for yourself and do it because you love it, and find the people who love and support you. And I think that will help lessen the burden as well.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show, Molly.
Yeah.
You are a breath of fresh air. You are an inspiration. Thank you so much for being so generous with your story today.
Yeah, I hope somebody learned something, and it was fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Molly, for joining us on the show. I think the thing that I was challenged to do, like a really practical takeaway, is to do better at journaling my experiences. I do believe that that is a huge benefit to becoming a more intuitive runner, to actually writing things down instead of just leaving them stored in the back of my head without really putting thoughts and reactions to things.
If you were to regularly journal, what would you write about? Like everything?
I think that she gives some specific answers or questions that she answers for racing, but I think on the day-to-day to be able to talk about how the run went, how it felt, what other things in my day were going on that could contribute to how I'm feeling. But I think also taking with me the good things. I loved what she wrote, like, what do I take with me and what do I leave behind? And when you are able to let go of the things you need to leave behind and not continually ruminate on them, I think that it moves you towards progress, but also enjoying the sport more if you're leaving behind the bad experiences or leaving behind the things that don't help us move forward in our running journey. In life too, I guess. It's all really great, deep, helpful stuff.
That's good, yeah. I've always thought of journaling as essentially telling the story of the thing, and in a snapshot kind of way. And so the idea of, like, when I journal about my running, it's not so important to write the time I ran or the splits I ran and my paces, and although those things may be part of it, as much as it's like, what's the story of the day, or not necessarily thinking in terms of like you're trying to tell a story, but like, what's the thing that defines today's experience. And everything else that contributes to that is a piece of that. And so that makes sense. It's interesting. I will always say that the idea of writing about our experiences is an imperative when it comes to wanting to grow or change. So when like forming habits or breaking habits and those types of things, as many authors write when they talk about like the science of learning and how our brains move and shake and all of that, in principle, to do a thing very rarely actually produces sustained change. It's when you think about it or talk about it or write about it that actually produces a neurological effect that can result in change over time. So that's good.
Very good. And good luck to Molly and all of your future endeavors, including the 2024 Olympic Trials Marathon.
Hope to see you there.
Yes.
And now, let's get on to the world of running. First up in the world of running, one of the coolest track events ever that ever happens. It's not new this year, although it's reasonably new in general. But this is in London. They have a track meet that they call the Night of the 10,000 meter PBs, like personal bests. And so it's like a lot of just 10,000 meter races, but not exclusively. They also do like these youth races that are like 800 meters and such. So there's some shorter stuff. But in principle, it's just a lot of 10,000 meter heats, because the whole point is they set up this event for a distance that is very rarely run at a high level. It's just not a common thing. But also, even if it is run at a high level, it's like there's only a few heats at most, and there's only so many people that can do it. And so like if you got a lot of people that want to run a fast 10,000 meter, it's not very easy to find.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that they do this, and that they do this across, it spans many levels, so that people who are trying to run a personal best and qualify for the Olympics are game on, and people who are trying to run a personal best and won't ever be qualifying for the Olympics but are still trying to do the good thing, they can do it too.
They did such a good job with it because it was fun for all the spectators too, of which there were many spectators. So US, we're taking notes now, right?
Well, and so here's the thing about this one in particular. There doesn't have to be like tens of thousands of spectators at this event for it to just be a smashing success because of the way they do it. So what they do is they pull the audience onto the track everywhere except for like the home stretch, and the runners are only running in the first 4 lanes or so. And then so with that being the case, there's audience members all the way around the track and they're surrounding them. And in doing that, you don't need that many people to like make a pretty thick crowd surrounding a track in the fourth lane of the track.
It seemed lively.
But it looks like there still were tons of people there. But then beyond that, they had like these guys were like doing these silly skits, like clown show type of things. They had people doing like putting on some acts, like, you know, breathing fire and juggling stuff and juggling races. And it was just like a whole bunch of shenanigans in between each of the heats, or not every single heat, but in between different heats. And so that was kind of fun and very cool.
And they had, what are those called?
Pyrotechnics.
Pyrotechnics.
Like fireworks shooting up.
Yeah.
And then they had these tunnels. So on both of the straightaways, they had tunnels built over the track. And then there were people inside the tunnel cheering. So you can imagine like
So cool.
decibels were probably shattering eardrums during those tunnels. And then in the home stretch tunnel, it had like neon green lights all over it. So you always knew where you were in terms of the race because every time you hit the neon green, that's, you know, one more lap. So that was kind of cool too. So all sorts of interesting things to make the event a fun experience. You hear the athletes in their interviews after and before the race and such, and they're all talking about how much energy and just how exciting it was. Mm-hmm. And that's really cool.
And it's also cool that Paul Chelimo, who's like a U.S. rock star, ended up winning his heat in the fast heat, in just an awesome way where he dug super deep and he pushed really hard and had to do it in a difficult way. Do you want to tell them about it, Zach?
You just did. So Paul Chelimo won. He ran very fast. He ran 27:12, and from 5K on, he was basically solo. They did have the wave lights, pacing lights around the track. They had pacers as well, but they generally don't pace that long. When it's a 10,000 meter, they can pace a lot of it, but it's still, you're going to run a while by yourself. So they got the wave lights going around. They also have a guy on a motorcycle with the camera following the leaders the whole way around. So like there was just a lot going on. So even though he was by himself, he was by no means lonely up there. And so Paul Chelimo just was grinding and tried to chase those wave lights because they had the lights set at the World Championship qualifying time, and he just missed it, like by a handful of seconds. So he ran 27:12, which is number 8 on the U.S. all-time list. Says something about how hard it is to qualify by time on these events at this point. But number 8 on the U.S. all-time list, number 5 in the world this year on the season list, so not bad.
Not bad at all.
Based off of world rankings, as long as he runs enough races, he'll probably be in.
Yeah.
So he has to still be top 3 in the U.S., which he's got a good chance at that. He's got a race against the likes of Grant Fisher, Woody Kincaid, and Joe Klecker, among others. But so there's stiff competition at the U.S. level, but he showed up big time, and it was cool.
Yeah,
it is, by the way, also
the 5,000 because that's his main event.
Yeah, usually. But no, he's planning on moving up.
All right.
That was the point. Yep. So yes, Paul Chelimo, 3-time medalist in the 5,000 meters in world competition.
And
so
he's been on the podcast before.
Yeah, he's been on the show. He's talked about some fast things. So he did set a new meeting record as well for the night of the 10,000 meter PBs. Yeah, good stuff. On the women's side, also an incredible performance by the champ of the race. And in this instance, it was Mizan Alim Adane of Ethiopia, who also set a new meeting record, although she like totally smashed and obliterated the previous one, to become the 12th woman ever in the world to run under 30 minutes. Oh. She went 29:59.
So spicy.
And you could tell all she wanted was to do that. The whole time you could see, like, she ran way ahead of the wave lights, first of all. She passed the wave lights close to halfway and never looked back, and then just kept going.
Wow.
And really impressive performance. So that puts her at the, as mentioned, 12th woman ever under 30, so 12th all time. Now, in addition to that, the race was fast behind her as well, and it meant 11 women ran in the top 20 for the season list this year in the world in just this one race, that's really something.
That is.
And then on a little bit further behind her, there was a national record for Finland by Camilla Richardson.
Love to see it.
It's good, fast stuff. Now, one of the reasons they do this event at all is because it also is the British National Championships for the 10,000 meters. So while there's a whole bunch of other things going on, that race is still happening within the races.
The race
that are
within
going
the
on.
race.
Yes. So Ethiopian Adane won. American Chelimo won for the overall winners, but the Brits were still racing each other in those races. And it's the way they do it is the top 2 finishers at this meet will go on to represent Great Britain if they so choose and have high enough rankings. And so there's a discretionary spot, so you don't get every single one of the top British athletes showing up here because they don't have to, but most of them.
I mean, these are big names, so.
Yeah, certainly. So Andrew Bouchard, known as Andy, finished first for the men for Great Britain, and he ran a strong. It was 27:40s. It was a decisive. He was very deliberate about his decisions in the race and what he did to try to make sure that he held that spot well and didn't overcommit early when the pace was picking up, aka Paul Chelimo took off. So some good decisions there. And then on the women's side, Jessica Warner-Judd, previously known as Jessica Judd until she got married recently. So Jessica Warner-Judd finished first for the women in a very strong performance as well.
Apparently the Brits call her Jess, so that must be her nickname.
May indeed be that.
Was her name in the results.
So, moving on to the next one here, because since we're in Great Britain, we might as well talk about the Great Manchester Run. So on the roads, I think it was the same day, in fact. It might have been the next day, but they hold 2 major races on the roads in Great Britain outside of the London Marathon. They have the Great Manchester Run, which is a 10K, and then the Great North Run, which is a half marathon. That's in September. And so these are like gathering international greats when they run these events. There aren't that many road races that aren't major marathons that do this, and this is one of them. So it's always kind of an anticipated event to see who's who and who's going to show up and try to do it. Of course, Sir Mo Farah was running. This was his penultimate event, meaning his second to last event that he'll ever do, according to him. He plans to retire.
As a professional.
Yeah, he says he's not really planning on doing a lot more. He might do some running still.
If people are paying him money to come, he might just come and just say he's not a professional.
I don't think they'll pay him money anymore if he's retired.
He's super famous.
He is super famous. Sir Mo, as they call him. So he ran, and he finished decent. He was like 8th or something. He's by no means in top form anymore and doesn't pretend to be, but still going out and racing hard.
And it's still
while
fast.
While he's still finishing his kind of overture here.
Victory lap.
So he did that, and then he'll be back in the Great North Run for his final event before retirement. But on the women's side, it was an interesting race because the top contenders also happened to be the top marathon performers in the majors this spring. So you've got the likes of Helen Obiri, who won Boston, and then you've got Perez Jepchirchir, who was a leading contender for the London Marathon, and both of them, a month later or less, come back to run a 10K at the world stage in Great Manchester, and Helen Obiri just crushed everyone, just crushed them. So apparently she can win Boston Marathon, and then 4 weeks later can also beat everyone at a 10K on the roads.
Very cool.
She can do that.
She can do that.
Because she just did.
Yeah.
So,
couple other things.
We were encountering a number of just some interesting things that we wanted to give you a quick note about, and then we've included some links if you want to like learn more for follow-up or something.
Because we're not going to talk in depth
Not
about
at
them.
length. But we should at least let you know because they're interesting. First of all, Strava released its new features. Apparently, they've got some kind of like StravaCon thing where they have people come and they tell you all the good things about them.
Huh.
We should look into this. Because that sounds like a great way to... You can pay us to come to a place and we'll tell you what we're doing next. Isn't that Isn't that how that
Good
goes?
for them.
Well, anyway, so that's what they did. And not that we're going to spend too much time talking about the features, except for that there's like some new map stuff, and they're
3D
constantly
maps.
saying over and over at this thing about their focus on like groups and bringing people together and stuff.
I
which is
like
great.
that initiative.
Yeah, certainly. However, the cautionary note, the more we see people engaging with Strava and the nature of what Strava engagement is looking like over time, the more concerns seem to rise in terms of like people talking about Strava has been difficult for us because I have trouble comparing myself to other people all the time because I'm constantly like wanting to do things that I shouldn't probably do in training, but I want to do it because it looks better on Strava or some of that kind of stuff. We're hearing a lot of that. Now, of course, naturally, not everybody is having a negative experience with these kinds of things, and we're not trying to say that. However, I do want to bring up Jaron Lanier's great caution about technology tools from way back when he wrote that book about 10 reasons to give up all social media forever or something. I don't know, that's the title, basically, paraphrasing.
Drama.
Lanier says that in all ways, we should always beware the technology that's built on that business model that profits more from the more time you spend on it. And so any kind of technology tool that is doing everything it can to get you spending more time on it is a highly dangerous thing. And we should be running away from them as a society. That was his caution. I happen to agree with the premise. So when Strava comes out and says we're looking for more ways to get people on our system in more kinds of things, not just when you're running and biking anymore, that raises more of those cautionary things for me. Okay.
And the other caution, I just want to put it out there, is to be careful because it is one of the apps that tracks where you are.
Hide your kids, hide your wife, hide your location.
Hide your location. Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Don't let people know where you are publicly. It is the worst possible thing you could do for long-term safety. Okay, good. Now, we did have something that's really fascinating for all runners that you want to hear about. We came across this article published in, where was this, Outside? Yeah, published in Outside magazine. They were writing about some studies. This is Alex Hutchinson, so you always know it's going to be good stuff when he's writing. And he's writing about plyometrics and the studied effects of plyometrics on running economy for distance runners. So
the stuff that Hodge was telling me as a junior hire.
In fact, now what I found interesting is that they kept saying that in some of these studies, and then Hutchinson's commentary kept underscoring the point that they don't know exactly why plyometrics has this kind of an effect on running economy. I feel like that's something you can figure out. It's, like, they've been studying it. I don't know. It sounded to me like it was kind of straightforward. Like he actually made it clear why, but at the same time, they didn't want to make that claim in the study.
Didn't want to make the link.
Not yet. So anyway, here's the deal. They found consistently in a number of different studies that 6 to 8 weeks of some fairly simple plyometric routines can have substantial positive effects on your running economy, up to and exceeding 4% improved running economy, which if you know that number, why does that number keep coming up? Because that was Nike's original claim with the Super Shoe. That's why they called it the 4%. So he keeps saying, like, you're going to spend all this money on shoes to get yourself 4%, but you could also do some really simple stuff, and it only takes 6 to 8 weeks to get another 4%. So now you're talking 8%. Well, actually, technically, anyway, so 6 to 8 weeks. What would they had one routine that was like kind of elaborate, like actually quite elaborate. And it was like, wow, that's great. If you can have all that equipment and have all that time to do that plyometrics routine, that's wonderful. But what about the rest of us who can't and don't? And they said, okay, let's do a study where all the people do in the study is they just do hops, like lots of just hopping on your feet with no equipment, with no other movement, just hopping. 6 weeks of just hopping yielded substantial running economy improvements. I'm not even kidding. So that was really fascinating. Now, I'm not telling you right now to go out and just hop around.
Well, if you want to.
Well, maybe. But here's the point. They also find significant increases in risk of injury when people undertake plyometric routines, mostly because people do it a little bit too not carefully, a little bit
aggressively.
Yes, thank you. So be cautious, be careful, and understand that the number one problem that comes from plyometric stuff is tendinitis injuries. And so if you've got like a history of Achilles problems and some of that kind of stuff, or some IT band issues, be cautious. Be cautious. All right, that's it. Track night in New York City also happened. And while there were always interesting things in every race that we'd love to report on, we're running out of time. So we'll at least just mention that this very fun Trials of Miles event included some of the big namers in the middle long distance stuff, running some kind of like early season, kind of trying out their legs and such. And Ajay Wilson looked great in the 800, winning what appeared to be quite easily, and certainly letting up near the end. And then Bryce Hoppel for the men, winning the 800, which is great to see him in good form, winning in a strong but reserved effort, because Bryce Hoppel is definitely one of the U.S. hopefuls for international contest as well.
Mm-hmm.
So among that, there's some others too. We're going to include the link if you want to go and you can read more about it, as with all the rest of these things.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of fun reporting on the world of running. There's so much that we aren't able to get to, but if you see something that you think is awesome in the world of running, news that you would like us to report on or you think might be interesting, send it our way too. We like to see it.
It's great. Many of the things that we share are things that you put us onto.
Yeah. So we appreciate that. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Molly for coming on the show to share your wisdom. That was awesome. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.